Hello and welcome to the Sci-Fi Christians Game of Thrones reviews. I'm Ben DeBono.
I'm Ben Kirkwald.
And we got one more to go after tonight.
Alright.
So, fuck the haters. I love this episode. I thought it was great. There's a few things we could talk about as far as when we get into the Scorpions. They really hyped those up and then they got taken out very easily. And I think there was one amusing shot where Danny was taking them out and they weren't even trying to pivot to shoot the dragon. But you know what? It was a great episode. There's so much here to like. We'll get into all of that, and I want to introduce a way to kind of think about these last couple seasons of Game of Thrones that will hopefully allow you to dislike the things that deserve to be disliked, because they're there, but also enjoy the things that deserve to be enjoyed, because they're there. So I'm going to introduce that here, and we're going to have a great time. But you brought cigars tonight, so why don't you tell us what you got?
So these are Excaliburs from the Hoyt Monterey company. It's just a division of theirs. There's a couple different variations of this one. This one has the English wrap on it.
Yes.
So I'm
and
excited
these are
about
big
them.
ass Churchill cigars.
I've never had one of these, but I've heard nothing but good things from people about them. So
agreed.
I'm excited.
I'm excited too. Yeah, so I have a lot of good stuff in my humidor right now. I think we were talking about...
Yeah, you just got two more.
Right, those 1502. We had the 1502 Emerald last week. I just got in the 1502 Lanceros, and they're fantastic. I think I'm going to let them sit for a little bit, but all is well in cigar world. And then next week, you have one you bought specifically for the finale.
Yeah, I bought a Churchill for the finale. I'm excited.
So I've had that sitting in my humidor, and I'll have to pick one out that's appropriately equal to the spectacle of 8 years, 8 seasons, 8+ years of great television. That's right, haters. Great television.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm the last person who should be speaking out when it comes to people being critical. But, you know, I am enjoying this season. I'm enjoying the show. What are you going to do? All right, and then what do we have for beer?
We have the Doghead 120. This is a 120-minute IPA. For a long time, it was a very difficult beer to find. It would come out once a year. I feel like they would release like 10 bottles total throughout the country. And you could just never find it.
Never find it.
And then I found it. And then the next year...
It was an exciting day.
And then it was. And I was like, yes! I found it at like...
Now you could just walk in and buy it.
Yeah. Well, so it's not very exciting anymore. But
it's still tasty.
But it is an aging beer. So you save this one, you age it, you can age it up to 10 years.
Very rare for an IPA.
Right. And so this is aged 2 years, this one. So...
Well, it's like, what, 18%?
Yeah, it's that's why we have one 12-ounce bottle for two of us, because,
you don't just chug this guy.
No, this is not. This is a sipper, as they would say.
Yes. And then next week for the finale, you have a scotch we're going to drink.
No, whiskey.
A whiskey we're going to drink.
It's the Pendleton Director's Cut. And it's got, the label on it is just fantastic alone. I'll show you guys next week.
Well, that's great.
It's like a leather label, a burned leather label that's been fashioned to it, and my brother's friend was the one who designed it, so he got a couple bottles for free.
That's awesome.
I got one, so they sell for like $150 or so.
That is awesome.
I will,
And then I have one of the original Take the Black Stout that we're going to be drinking as well. Original, because they've reissued it a couple times, and they're going to be reissuing it again this fall.
Oh, sure.
But this is one of the first run Take the Black Stout, so I feel like it was about a year or so into the show that it was released. So it's at least 5 years old.
Which is probably perfect for a stout.
Perfect. So that's going to be very tasty, I think. Well, let's open up this guy, and then we can start talking about the episode and Game of Thrones in general.
Yeah.
So, here's what I want to introduce as far as how to think about this is how you can help yourself enjoy the final season while also being open to some of the valid criticisms of the final season. And, well, really the final couple seasons. Because, in my opinion, there's a lot I like about this season. And there's things I liked about last season. But last season is definitely the low point of the show. But here's the distinctions I think you need to make to enjoy Game of Thrones to the utmost while still being an intelligent viewer. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you need to make a distinction between what is happening, how it's happening, and the aesthetics of the show.
Yes.
Let me explain. Yeah. Okay, so as a book reader who has been waiting 18 years for the end of this story, I will be honest, I'm not watching the show in a vacuum. I'm watching the show as part of the complete picture of my experience with the Song of Ice and Fire story. Mm-hmm. So because of that, I'm maybe most interested in what happens. In other words, the mechanics of how, or not the mechanics, the actual point of who dies, who winds up where, what the plot developments are, that stuff.
Right.
Okay, then there's how it happens, which is how do we get from point A to point B.
Right.
This is where these last two seasons have been the most open to criticism, and validly so. We were talking before the episode aired.
Well, yeah, because George gave them, I'm here, we're going to be here.
Right.
And the further you get from there, the more variables they are. Mm-hmm. Even though knowing that you have to come back to a single point, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, isn't that the
right? Yeah. But even given that, even the fact that they didn't know, I think the showrunners can be 100% blamed for the fact that these last two seasons are rushed. They should never have been shortened from the original 10 episode sets. I think you feel a little bit of that even tonight, and I think this is a phenomenal episode, but I'm going to point out where I think that comes into play tonight. So there's the mechanics of how a good example would be Rhaegal dying last week. Mm-hmm. The fact that Rhaegal dies, the fact that Dany is arrogant and blows this 3-dragon lead that she has, that's a great what happens. Mm-hmm. The how of it, the fact that she's just an idiot and completely forgets about the Iron Fleet and it just seems arbitrary, totally open to criticism.
Yeah.
And then the aesthetics of it, and in my opinion, the show just has from day one knocked the aesthetics out of the park. The score, the cinematography, the acting are all top notch.
Right.
Certainly places you can nitpick here and there. John and Dany, the actors who play them, don't have great chemistry, and so that would be one recent place you can nitpick. But the aesthetics of the show are fantastic.
Yeah.
So when it comes to season 8, I would say I'm very high on what is happening.
Yep.
There's a few things we need to wait till the very end to suss out, especially regarding the use of the White Walkers, and we'll talk about that. Maybe at the end we can talk about our expectations for next week.
Yep.
The how it happens, mixed bag, open to criticism. Mm-hmm. The aesthetics, very high on.
Yep.
So that's where I am.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the way that just thinking about it, it's just not the way that George would have taken the story. And that's because that's just not him writing it. And
exactly.
And that's okay.
They went from somebody who was very talented at doing this to two people who are, one of the main criticisms that I think is very valid is that they've written more for the moments than they have for the plot.
Yeah.
Totally valid. However, from a what perspective, the moments are still great.
Yeah.
Because we can key them into the existing story.
Right.
From a how perspective, when you're writing for just the moments, it can be a mixed
Over
bag.
the last couple seasons, I felt like the show is just filler for me until this book comes out.
Yeah, I think so. But that said, this really was a spectacular episode tonight. Probably the best of the season. Probably. We got to see a little bit. Where I'm so divided on the show for this season is episode 3. I feel like we need something else regarding the White Walkers, and that's where I brought in my whole green ice theory, and that could still play out in some way or another, though we haven't gotten any hints of it since then, so I'm less confident than I was. We need something else in that supernatural White Walker realm to really make that plot line satisfying.
Yeah. Well, they brought all the supernatural... I don't know. I'm trying to think of it like... I feel like we're kind of tying it in... I feel like we're working our way back to what they all talked about during the first season. Like, they talked about the sack of King's Landing and how awful it was. And about how you should never want to do that to a city and blah, blah, blah. And here we are back again living history.
Right.
And so we lived history with defeating the White Walkers. We lived history with... This is just like a cyclical thing, and then Dany sits on the throne, and then... Who knows what from there.
Now, the White Walkers, let's assume for a second that we don't get any more regarding the supernatural part.
I'm assuming not, actually.
I think that's fair. I'm not quite convinced myself. I still think there's another shoe to drop in terms of the supernatural elements of the show. Whether that has an impact on how we see that storyline or not, we'll see. But I'm still in the camp that there's another shoe to drop. But... let's think of this as a 10-episode season instead of a 6-episode season. So you have 4 extra episodes to work with. And so, in that matrix, the Battle of Winterfell would be tonight instead of 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Okay, so you'd have 2 extra episodes. Well, at least one of those episodes, if you're plotting out that storyline, is going to give you a real sense of loss and devastation. So in other words, it still might be... in a 10-episode matrix, it still might feel premature, it still might feel wasted, but imagine that you had an entire episode based on the devastation of the White Walkers invading the North, rather than the one scene at the end of episode 1 of the kid on the wall. Right. I think you'd feel very different. I think that the problem... assuming that this is all we get of the White Walkers, the problem that you have is that there was no sense of loss. Right? Is that there was, it's kind of like they came, they showed up, they were defeated, the end. What you needed was kind of that Empire Strikes Back moment, that sense of defeat before ultimate victory.
Right, that they were actually retreating, that it wasn't just people showing up, they were retreating to Winterfell, they weren't...
Right. Okay, so all of that kind of plays into where we start tonight. And one of the things where I think you can be critical of the how, even of this episode, which again, I thought was fantastic. We mentioned this a little bit last week, that last week felt like 2 episodes kind of crammed into 1.
Yep.
Which it worked okay, because it was longer, but it was still 2 episodes in 1. Would have been better if you had 2 full episodes instead of 1 episode extra long, but still divided in 2 parts.
Right.
I felt that a little bit tonight with the Varys stuff. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it worked. But I think if this was a 10-episode season, having a whole episode of Dany dealing with what she just saw with Missandei and realizing she has to kind of go, or in her mind at least, has to go nuts. And then Varys scheming. And imagine you had a whole hour of that first 20 minutes.
Right.
Would have been a lot more satisfying.
Yeah. It would have given us a lot more into... Instead of they tried too hard with a lot of these scenes, I feel like. I feel like they were just trying to convey too much with a single moment. Where in a full episode you would see that grow over time. Or over the course of a few episodes we would see... something build up.
Varys being executed is a fantastic final scene of the episode. That said, I still really like these first 20 minutes.
Yep.
I like the idea of Varys, who's had the little birds, and he invites the girl in, who's clearly one of his little birds, and all the soldiers are watching me, and I see what was great about that moment is it completely flips. These are the good guys she's talking about.
Right.
These are, Grey Worm, the Unsullied, the Dothraki, Dany's troops, all of these, the heroes that we've been following are now the people who were feeling paranoid about them watching us. Like, that's a great what moment.
Right.
Give it more time. Give it more time. That's the valid criticism of the season. But don't be critical of the what, because the what is still really good, and the what works brilliantly thematically with this show.
Right. The how they're doing it is a struggle.
Exactly. I really like the whole conversation early on with Tyrion and Dany. Someone has betrayed me.
Oh my god, I was like,
I
couldn't even understand what they were talking about. I thought that they were both, that Tyrion and Varys were both going to be executed. I did not think that it was going to. I thought all three of them, when they were all three out there. I was like, oh, so we're just going to do this all three at the same time, and then Tyrion's like, it was me. And I was like, so is Tyrion dying then, or
right, or Jon? I mean, Sansa's definitely on the chopping block.
Right.
One thing is sure from this episode, Dany's done playing nice.
Yep.
Not that needed to be stated after the second half of this episode, which is, we'll get there. But yeah, I like the whole idea that who betrayed her? Jon betrayed her.
Yeah.
She executes Varys, but who in her mind betrayed her? Jon. That's where it started. I really like, too, we'll get to Varys' I want to come back to that in a second, Varys' execution, because that's a big moment. But I like the scene of Dany and Jon where she's talking about how people love you and people don't love me. And that, to me, was a great callback all the way to Book 1, Season 1 of, who's her brother? I'm blanking on his name.
Oh, what's his face? Yeah. Somebody.
Yeah. Golden Crown guy is talking about how the citizens of Westeros are just, they love us. They're waiting for us to come back. They've got banners ready to unfurl in your honor and that whole thing. And it's like, Dany long ago figured out that that wasn't factually true, but a part of her is still hanging on to that and is still angry about the fact that that isn't the case.
Right.
Really a good callback, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, here's what I loved about Varys' execution. When she says Dracarys, it's said monotone, it's routine. It's like she's gone from, what was the first moment we heard Dracarys? It was probably with the Unsullied.
No, it was when they were all three little in the House of the Undying.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Well, that was the first big moment. She was
the first big
practicing
moment
with them before.
Sure, okay. But you have that, then you have the moment where she frees the Unsullied and she burns the slave masters, and on it goes. And it's like this whole triumphant moment has, first it becomes routine. It's just Dracarys. Matter of fact, there's nothing even tragic for her in what she's doing.
Right.
And then later on in the episode it becomes war crimes and atrocities and all of this, and we see the character we've been cheering for 8 years become a far bigger villain than Cersei ever was.
Yeah.
And we'll get there. And here's what I like, from this point you know exactly where the episode's going, but it was still so satisfying to watch it play out. I really, the rest of the way, there's a few minor complaints around Euron in particular. Oh, good God.
Well, and Jaime and Cersei's deaths.
Okay, we'll get there.
Right.
I'm not sure I mind that quite as much, but we'll get there. But yeah, there's some minor complaints, but so you have Varys is dead. I liked his whole line of, I sincerely hope I'm wrong about this. I like that Varys was committed to the realm to the very end.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? Damn it. This is why it was such a mistake for them to kill Littlefinger last year.
Yeah.
How great would it have been if Littlefinger was sitting there waiting in the wings to take Varys' place?
Right.
Varys the counselor, the Machiavellian, but one with a moral conscience, and he dies, and who steps in to take his place? It's Littlefinger manipulating Dany. That would have been fantastic.
And that could still be the case in the books. We don't know.
It could be. Could be. I thought you were going to say it could still be the case next week.
No, it is not the case
I think
next week.
Qyburn is dead, where nobody else is.
Very good, yeah.
Yes. All right, so we have a war council. The whole mercy. I like that line if they think mercy is our weakness, but mercy is our strength. And you think, oh man, old Danny's back. And mercy is our strength. The mercy we show to future generations.
Right. This generation is screwed, so we're going to kill this one. And then remember in the future how grateful you are that everybody else died.
So this in my mind would be an interesting piece of historical research. And I don't know the answer to this because I'm thinking of it kind of on the fly. But how many war crimes and atrocities are done with the justification that the future will be better because of what we did here in the present?
Well, one could argue that the winner of the war is the only person that didn't commit war crimes.
True. But even taking, kind of that historical view out of the equation, the argument that the present is worth sacrificing for the sake of the future, and that therefore that justifies any number of war crimes, I'm guessing is very prevalent in history.
Oof.
That's a heavy topic.
Yeah.
Because in one sense it rings true of that what parent isn't willing to sacrifice their own well-being for the sake of their children?
Right.
And how is that different? Well, it is different, but it's tough to really say how.
Don't bring that up. Jeez.
But the whole idea of that we will sacrifice the present, we're going to sacrifice the good of the present for the sake of the future. And you can argue how sincere Dany is in that. Maybe she's not sincere at all. Maybe it's just a justification for her to get her crown.
Right.
But that line of argument seems to me to be a really slippery slope. And one that...
When you start rationalizing things, it gets really tricky.
Mm-hmm.
Just in life, too.
Right.
When you start rationalizing a decision that you're like, oh, that probably wasn't the best one. But, if you really think about it, it's like, well, no, that's not a morally just decision then.
Yep. So in the same scene, we learn Jaime was captured, and then she has that line to Tyrion, the next time you fail me, well, look for that to come back next week, I think.
Yeah.
Next time you fail me, I'll kill you.
At least Jaime and Cersei are buried way beneath everything, so
they are.
Don't have to worry about that.
They are. Okay, so Davos and Tyrion. Tyrion asks Davos for a favor. We don't find out what it was. So there's a plot thread for next week.
I just assumed it was about the bells, but maybe it's to tell my story or something.
Maybe. I don't know. I like the Hound and Arya arriving in the camp. They just don't give a shit.
It was a good callback to them arriving into the feast at the twins, I thought. But they just didn't fucking care.
Right.
It's like, no, we've seen way too much shit at this point. We're getting dirt.
No, and I like that the dynamic between them has become increasingly equal. Then it was the Hound dragging Arya along, and she's still developing, and now they're very much equals.
Yep.
And pour one out for one of the greatest duos on the show, which obviously, given subsequent events, it's over.
Right.
Now. Which is fine.
Right.
Because we had Clegane Bowl, and we'll get there. Alright, Tyrion releases Jaime. That's going to come back and bite him in the ass next week.
As it always has.
As it always has.
Every person that's released Jaime has died.
That's a good point. So you have Catelyn.
Yep.
Who else has released Jaime?
That's it.
Alright. I was expecting you to rattle off a list or anything, but yeah.
Well, how'd they get out of... Oh, Brienne's still alive.
Brienne's still alive.
How did he get out of Harrenhal? They just came and took it, right? Or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
I did like the callback to season 4 when Jaime frees Tyrion.
Yes.
So I think that was a nice, and even the path he was telling him to take was the same path Tyrion took.
Right.
Way back when. All right, Hound and Arya then arrive at King's Landing. Jaime arrives at King's Landing. We're all getting ready for the war. one of the things that was interesting here is Tyrion asked Jaime, how'd you get caught? And he said, his hand or whatever. And then we see him walking through the crowd, and he still has his hand on it. And at first I'm thinking, what an idiot. But then he's holding it up. That was his plan.
Right.
Yes.
Just be like, I'm you know me. I'm the guy with the golden hand.
Exactly.
It made sense.
So that worked. Well,
it didn't work.
It didn't work for him. It worked in terms of what he was thinking in the episode.
He was thinking something clear.
All right. And then all hell breaks loose, and let's talk about this, because this is going to be one of the moments that I'm sure people are going to be bitching about, not entirely without justification, that Dany first goes to town on the Iron Fleet, and then later goes to town on all the Scorpions.
Love it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what was going to happen. Why make it take 30 minutes?
Right.
Like, we could have had the army scale the wall.
Yep.
And lose a bunch of people, and then they would have taken out the one, and then they would have ran across the wall to take out the other, and it would have happened, but it looked way more badass the way that this happened.
Yep. I think that if you're going to criticize the show for how they handled the Scorpions, that criticism belongs with last week, not this week.
Yeah.
Okay, so last week kind of built them up as this big threat, and, maybe Dany can't really do it now that she only has one dragon, and they built 15,000 of these things. And yes, there was the shot I referenced earlier where they're not even trying to shoot Drogon, and he's taking them out, and whatever. Okay, so that's a how.
They were not quite as easy to swivel this time.
They were not. So, valid criticism of the show. That the abilities of the Scorpions change depending on what the plot requires.
Yep.
That said, I'm much more thematically and plot satisfied by the idea that Dany has a choice. She can fight the hard battle and not commit war crimes, or she can drop the nuke and win this thing like that.
Right.
And so, to me, it's almost like the Scorpions, they're fine as a plot device. I never really loved them. Not really sad that they got swept aside for a more satisfying outcome. It's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, that seems fair. They were there for a week or two. And, I mean, if you look back at any of the threats that are there, they're usually there for a week or two. And
I think if you want to criticize the show for building them up so much in the first place, totally valid.
Yep.
If you want to criticize this episode for sweeping them aside, it made the right choice.
It did.
That
it was a Dorne-type decision.
Exactly. The Scorpion problem was already introduced before this episode. It was doing the best. It chose the best possible option, given the state of things when this episode began.
Yeah.
Alright, so we get the fake out on Euron's death. I was hoping he was really dead. I thought that would have been great.
You know that nobody in this show is really dead until they're dead.
That's true. And then, the Golden Company, another thing you could be critical of. They built them up, but just destroyed in a second.
They didn't build them up as much as even the books. Right now in book 5, they're being built up quite a bit. And I talked to you in the show, that guy who was out front, who we don't know the name of.
Well, we do know his name, but
there's a name.
There is a name.
I hope in the books that there's 20 chapters on this guy. We hate him more than we hate, any of the Lannisters. And then it would be so satisfying.
Or maybe we love him. And it makes us feel conflicted about Dany even more. I don't know. But yes.
Either way, I hope there's a lot about him. I just hope that's one of the little nuggets that that George R. R. Martin talked to him about. It's really, this guy is blah, 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 and he's really good, whatever. And then I can watch this show 50 years from now when he finishes the books, and then I can watch that episode and be like, oh my god, that's the guy. Oh, he did that. Oh, this is even better than
It's a 6-episode versus 10-episode casualty.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
Valid criticism. Still doesn't make it any less satisfying when Drogon explodes through that gate from the back. Speaking of satisfying moments, Okay, Dothraki charging through the streets of King's Landing.
Since
18 years later. 18 years later. Been waiting for that. So, fuck you and all your criticisms of this episode, or of this season. I am very satisfied to watch Dothraki charge through the streets of King's Landing.
There you go.
It makes me happy. I've been waiting for that for 18 years. I'm not going to not enjoy it when it happens. So Drogon just goes bananas. All the scorpions are destroyed, we find out. Iron Fleet are destroyed. Qyburn tells Cersei it's time to leave.
Yep.
The bells aren't ringing.
Can't even believe it.
Yep. This was a great setup for what happens next. Because they built up the bells and everything. And then you've got that scene where they're kind of staring down the Lannister troops.
Yep.
And you know that the morale is low. And they drop their swords. And the bells start ringing. And it's like, we just know what's going to fucking happen next.
It's like, I don't know why she needed to... What's the reasoning right there for Dany?
Because
how did
every
she rationalize
time
it?
a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin. That's it.
But what's the rationale? Like, I can think crazy person rationale. I can do that. And I can't right now.
Oh, see, I gotta disagree on that one. I thought that was perfect. I really thought that was perfect. I thought that was, okay, she has gone legit Mad Queen. She doesn't care. She feels scorned. They didn't unfurl the banners in her honor. They don't love her like they should. She isn't getting her due, so fuck all of them. We're dropping the bomb.
But they asked to ring the bells. They asked for it to end.
Yes, they did. That's not the same as saying we love you and want you. It's not the same. That's
when
when,
you put it like
what
that.
Danny has been expecting since the first season.
Because when Dany comes in, it's like,
yes.
Queen Khaleesi, just like...
So, and that's something, forget the first season. That's been what Martin set up in the first book. 1996.
Okay. So that scene in the book is going to contain ring the bells, and in Dany's head, it's going to say, why aren't they praising me? Why aren't
they because her brother, whose name we can't remember, was all about, they're going to unfurl banners for us. They're going to welcome us home. They're just waiting for us. And Dany is clearly on some level still expecting that, and she has snapped. Dany has gone nuts. She is the Mad Queen.
That's perfect.
We don't know what the episode title of this is yet, but I'd be willing to bet it is the Mad Queen.
That seems fair.
And I also like Grey Worm going nuts in that moment. It almost makes the greatest love story of our time feel worth it. Almost. Not quite.
No, but he was broken then.
Oh, but he just, you've got a surrendered enemy and he just starts going nuts. And then Jon has, you can clearly see in Jon's mind, it's this WTF. What am I involved in? What is going on? And I like, too, going back to Dany's motivation, you have to remember what's she looking at in that moment. She's looking at the Red Keep. It's like, that's it. And it's being surrendered to her, but it's not being open to her. It's a difference. It's a difference.
Wow. Yeah.
And again, that's not a justification for any flaws in Season 8. That is something that has been being set up since the first book 25 years ago.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
Alright, so now we just all go nuts. And this is great. And I knew early on in the episode where you saw the shot of Cersei.
Alright. Calm down.
This is a high ABV beer. Cersei looking out at the city and you see all the nice little houses and everything. I just knew there was going to be a subsequent shot of that just all burnt, and sure enough there was.
Man, I did not think that.
And so then you have Jon stops a rape, he stabs one of Dany's soldiers, and it's like the dynamics completely changed. Mm-hmm. And what has Game of Thrones done from the very beginning that's so brilliant, it's that it's taken our good guys and it's made them bad guys. It's taken our bad guys and made them good guys.
Yep.
And here, who did you honestly want to win? at this point in the episode? Who did you want to win? Who did you feel sorry for?
And the people.
The people. Right.
That was it.
Right.
The regular people.
Exactly. Who's the villain at this point in the show?
Any person in power.
Yes, but especially Danny.
Yeah.
Especially
well,
Danny.
at that moment, Danny. Yeah.
Absolutely, it's Danny. We've been cheering for her since episode 1. And now she's the villain. She's at where she wants, and there's no ambiguity about it. What she did was unambiguously evil. Mm-hmm. It's great. I mean, it's not great in a moral sense.
It's great.
But it's great in a thematic sense, yes. Okay, so Drogon's taking down the Red Keep. Jaime and Euron have their moment. Blah, blah, blah.
I hated that. Euron should not have any fucking part in anything.
Well, he really doesn't. I mean, he said he killed Jaime Lannister, but he really didn't.
Well, he would have. Jaime is not going to live through the
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Alright.
But yes, still dumb. Still totally agree. Dumb.
Unless,
dumb.
I mean, they set up Euron pretty well in the books. And then
not in the show.
No.
I mean, for people who think I'm not critical of the show, Euron sucked in the show. Full stop.
No, yes. God, yes.
Terrible character.
But in the books, they set him up. They set him up to have a character, or to have a pretty significant part in book 6.
Mm-hmm.
Because the way that, well, he's got his boats flowing through, they're coming to Old Town or something like that. Coming up the river through Old Town to start raiding that way or something like that. The end of the 5th book. And so, like, he's going to be playing a significant role in the books.
Agreed. Book Euron, of all the characters, Book Euron is maybe the most different from his cinematic comic.
Yeah, Book Euron's about 20 years older, it seems.
Very, very different, yes. I love the wildfire exploding.
And now it's like, who laid that? Was that...
Well, I think it was supposed to be the Mad King's secret stories. We know he laid it all around the city. And so there's kind of this generational component there of that, yes, Danny is blowing this up, but so is the Mad King. This is partly his destruction and her destruction. Where does the one end and the other begin?
Right.
I thought that was fantastic. I just loved it from a visual standpoint. I loved it from a entertainment standpoint. I loved it from a thematic standpoint, from a character standpoint. It was a small thing, but I'm so glad they had the wildfire exploding. Just fantastic all the way around. Arya and the Hound are now in the Red Keep.
Right?
And he convinces her to leave.
Thank God.
Yeah, but what a great moment. What
I know.
A great moment.
She finally listened to him. For the first time ever, it seems.
But I just love that you want to be like me.
Right.
It's like he realizes his soul is gone. And he saves her. It's just so good.
It's probably the only time the line, "look at me," has made me feel compassion for a person.
Finally, years of waiting, Clegane Bowl is here. The Mountain versus the Hound. Now, we cut away from this a lot of times. Let's just talk about the whole thing. Qyburn dies.
That was the perfect Qyburn death. As meaningless as his reign was.
Yes.
Right?
Cersei leaves, and then they just go at it. I thought it was great. I love Clegane Bowl.
Just the eye thing, I was like, oh!
Yeah, the eye thing where he starts stabbing his eyes. I was like, oh, fuck, I can't take it again! You know, they go out the window, or not the window, but the wall, or yes.
And then they die in the flames. The thing
perfect.
That he's been...
So perfect. So, I'm sure that the internet will have reasons they hated that scene, but I love that scene. I thought it was great.
Them flying into fire together is perfect.
Yes.
It's perfect.
Perfect. And what else was perfect is that the result of all that is that Cersei is left alone. And I just love that here she is in the middle of what she wanted, her castle, the Red Keep.
Yeah.
She's alone. Jaime finds her. Let's just go ahead and talk about their end.
I have issues with it.
Okay, so let's hear your issues.
Cersei is a big enough villain in this series to not get a death worth a villain. You know what I mean by that? Like, Joffrey chokes to death.
Mm-hmm.
Like, or even the major characters. So if you go, like, Ned epically gets his head cut off.
Yep.
Like, Robb, Red Wedding.
Yep.
Just every major character gets a satisfying death that just feels like not necessarily even a shock, just like I feel like it satisfied me.
Yes.
And this didn't. And I'm not okay with that.
So, two things to that. First of all, in the books, it's going to be different because of the whole prophecy about her brother killing her, and so they didn't play that up as much as on the show. But in terms of the context of the show, here's what I thought worked. Is she really a villain anymore at that moment? No. She's now a victim. And she's a victim not of a direct execution. She's not a victim of a direct Dany going nuts or Arya killing her or anything else. She is a victim of the indiscriminate rage, which she is really not responsible for. She's a victim of something that goes beyond her, and for all of her flaws, she's just another victim of Drogon destroying cities.
I don't care. I still want somebody to stab her.
I don't know. It worked for me. It worked for me. Now, what won't work for me is if we come back next week and we have her and Jaime climbing out of the rubble.
No,
that would just be awful.
not. That's not going to happen.
No. So let's hope that's not the case.
They're supposed to be, what, 6 levels down at that point?
Yes. They're dead. They're dead. And if they're not dead, that is the strongest plot armor I've ever seen. It's
such
just
bullshit.
Yes,
that
exactly.
Would be it right there.
I love the scenes of Arya leaving. I didn't really need the whole peasant woman that we were following the whole time.
I think a lot of people half thought it was the waif. Because there are still people that are obsessed with the waif.
Yes,
and the waif is
she's not the waif. But I like that whole scene of Arya trying to kind of get her bearings, and she's running, and she's afraid, and she's bloody, and all that.
It's probably the first time she's felt that way since Bravos.
Long time.
Long time. Is it? Yeah, Bravos, House of House of Black and White. Yeah.
Jon calls the retreat. Fall back.
Yep.
And then we get the last scene. You've Ash falling, which is a callback to the House of the Undying vision.
Yep.
Arya finds the horse, which I'm sure people will be upset about for some reason. I thought it was to go with our 3 levels. What, how, aesthetics. That was a very strong aesthetic scene.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the what means yet. Don't know what the how means yet.
It was a way for her to quickly get out of the city after being...
What, is she getting out of the city? Or is she riding towards the Red Keep?
Either way, she's going to kill Dany. Doesn't matter.
That's right. We don't know, though. But that's the thing. That's what I liked about it, is that there's a certain ambiguity.
Right.
With where is she going.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what happens next week?
Dany sits on the Iron Throne.
Yep.
And it looks exactly like the House of the Undying.
Yep.
Which should disturb her.
It won't.
It should.
It should. It won't.
It won't. And then it looked like the only scene that had gave us any sort of hint in the preview was she was like standing on what looked like a pyramid of some sort. Staring down at everybody.
I thought that was the dragon pit.
Oh, is that what that was?
I think so.
Okay. Dany's dead.
Tyrion gets executed.
Correct. Tyrion first.
Yep.
Then Dany.
Jon abdicates the throne.
And gives it to Gendry. Just like in the first episode of this
Maybe.
season when I was like,
I don't know.
fucking January.
Yes. I'm still holding out that there is something with Bran. There is still a supernatural shoe to drop.
Did
I'm
he
not
come
letting
with?
that go. He did not. But we're going to go back to Sansa and Bran. We'll see what happens. But I kind of like that the things we know are going to happen have happened. This is where I wanted season
Well,
6
Dany's
to be.
going to die. That's the
Yes.
only thing left, right?
Agreed.
Which is
So,
bittersweet.
agreed. I'm happy. This was a fantastic episode.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see how it ends. I wish we had a full 10 episode season, but we don't.
Right. Well, I don't know.
All right. So I guess till next week, everybody. I'm Ben Bono.
I'm Ben Kirkwood.
Goodbye.